Yes, I heard Lucy Masood talk about that, that she was kicked off a dating
Yeah, she
site because of
was.
that.
And Holly Lawford Smith was. I mean, actually,
Right.
lots of people I know have been.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it is important to say, and you mentioned it, that men aren't really being affected by any of this. Like I was at somewhere the other day where there was a men's washroom, and then there was one with like 3 or 4 different arrows and symbols, and whatever it meant was everybody
Hmm.
else. And so men
Yeah, well,
are
I
men
mean,
are
I would
not.
say, generally speaking, of course, women will get affected first because we're just the easy targets. But gay men are actually being affected through the same sort of mechanism. There are trans men, that
Mhm,
is females,
mhm,
who have may have taken testosterone, may not have taken testosterone
mhm,
on the apps. And
mhm.
I've seen evidence of gay men being chatted up by females, and the gay
Yeah.
men saying, sorry, I'm a gay man.
Yes.
I'm not interested in a female, no matter how you identify, and then
Yes.
being abused and called
Right.
transphobic and bigoted and so on.
Right.
So it is actually happening, although
Yeah.
probably less because trans women are much more invasive of our space.
And I think
Um,
men don't put up with it as much. I think women feel more intimidated, and
that's true.
women want to be nicer, and maybe not in the UK. I don't want women to be so
No,
nice
even
here.
in
I
the
wish they would.
UK, we are nicer
Yeah.
than men.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure. And so um where was I going with that question? Um I think that lesbians, I mean, we could go on about lesbian spaces, but or women's spaces in general, but we're talking about lesbians particularly. And I'm just wanting to ask you a broad question, because there's lots of lesbians that are registered here, and there's lots of feminists who aren't lesbians that are registered here. What is it? Why is it important for the broader community of feminists to be concerned about lesbian rights? I mean, we have specific relationships to
Hmm.
these interfering issues that are affecting us. I think that are can be more difficult for us than for heterosexual women. But what is the what is the pitch? Would you say if you?
Oh, this is where you should have asked Julie to give you the pitch because I mean, I think that I would just could only give you my version. And my version would just be probably not as vociferous as you want, but it would just be something like, look, if you're a feminist, you should care about other women. And
Yes.
obviously, lesbians are at the sharp end of this in a number of ways. Partly, our young lesbians are identifying out of their lesbianism and
Mm-hmm.
taking drugs and having surgeries that will irrevocably damage their physically healthy flesh.
Mm-hmm.
And at the other end, as it were, in the dating pools, we've got men who are saying they're lesbians and we're being attacked for, say, reasserting our sexual orientation
Yes.
against them. I mean, and we really are like, the head of Stonewall, outgoing head of Stonewall, equated lesbians who insist that they're not interested in trans women as something like, making them a bit like sexual racists who say, I don't date a black person, and
I
that
heard
was
that.
that she's the head of the organization supposed to be looking after our interests.
Yes.
So I think women should feminists have an interest in women who need help, and
Yes.
we need help. So I
Yes.
think, I mean, there's extra things that I'm sure some listeners would say about how lesbians are sticking it to the patriarchy or whatever by being lesbians. I'm not so into those points myself, but Julie would make them very strongly were she here.
Right.
So,
Right.
there's obviously lots of other things you can say there.
Yes. Yeah, the names that we're getting called, like you said, that sexual racist, and I've heard, genital fetishist. That's a popular one.
Yes.
Why are we so obsessed with people's genitals? Of course, transphobic and turfs and all of that stuff. But
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah, for sure.
And it's
Um,
just it's if you don't mind me interrupting,
yeah,
it's like that Darvo thing, isn't it? Deny, attack, reverse, or whatever. We're not the ones obsessed with genitals, you
no,
know.
no,
I mean, I like a whole person myself. I'm not
yes, yes,
zeroing in on their genitals necessarily in
no,
as an opposition to everything else, but
no.
um the male sexuality quite often is obsessed with genitalia.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I would say most heterosexual people are concerned with the physical bodies that their prospective
Yeah,
partners have.
everybody is. That's just
Everybody
what
is.
sexuality is, and it'd be a complete weird thing to just only care about genitals.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
never mind who had them.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think Chris, the other Chris, is going to get our Q&A open shortly. And if people have questions for Kathleen and you want to put them in the Q&A, then we will be able to see them and throw questions Kathleen's way. You know, we could go into a lot of other things, but let's keep talking about the Lesbian Project and the state of lesbians at this point. I know there's a group, until we see some questions, there's a group starting to have a conversation here about organizing a lesbian-only project of some sort. There's just some initial conversations that are starting, so that should be interesting, because I know that will probably end up in some kind of court challenge, I imagine. There's a few key trans activists in Canada who like to take down women.
Well, it would be good. I mean, it would obviously takes enormous amounts of resource and very draining, but it also, you know, could be an opportunity in that it draws attention to the plight of lesbians and the extremity of the activism against them.
Yes.
And it might clarify the law in favor of lesbians. You never know.
That's the other, that's the hope. That's the other part. And if it doesn't, if it ruled against us, well, that wouldn't be any different than us just sitting here not doing anything, thinking they're ruling against us.
No, exactly.
It would clarify, and that might change some people's minds that it rules against us too.
Yes, I mean, Maya Forstater lost her first tribunal, and that was when J.K. Rowling tweeted, and that's when everybody really thought, shit, this is an emergency. We are not allowed even to say what we think without potentially being fired. So sometimes it takes, you know, you have to get to the edge of a precipice before people think, okay, this is really serious, unfortunately.
Yes. And I know in Australia we're going to talk to some women there that have organized a lesbian organization, because during Pride last year, I think they weren't allowed to have a lesbian dance as part of the week-long festivities of all the various different groups of people. So that went to court. And I know here in Vancouver, I don't know if you have dyke marches there, but in Vancouver, at some point around the 80s or 80s, I think, dykes separated off from big gay pride stuff just because it was more male dominated and corporate kind of event to have this dyke march in another part of more working class part of Vancouver. And they were fun for a while, but I understand now, and I don't live there or go to the dyke march, but I understand now that certain women are banned from there who might have signs that have like a double women symbol on them. That's transphobic. So there's, it's interesting, because the same group that sees themselves as quite radical have rules and policies and correct speech, and you know, everybody has to fall in line with correct speech.
Oh yeah, intensely authoritarian. Also, they're not, I mean, in what way is it radical? They have the backing of the state. They do. They have the backing of major corporations. I was in Vancouver, as you know, and I walked around the harbour area, and there was the progress flag up the flag. You know, there's flags everywhere in Vancouver. You know, it's intensely corporate. It's not countercultural at all. It's hegemonic. No. So
I agree. Yeah, I say radical in your you would say inverted commas for sure. They're not radical. No. And they promote sex role stereotypes.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm going to look at some questions here. Gail wants to know, wants you to talk about any success you've had meeting with politicians.
Well, we have had some success meeting politicians, but I'm actually not going to say exactly who, because I think the kind of success, the relationships that we have depend on, you know, goodwill and that politician not being shamed on social media for meeting us. I mean, at some point we'll probably change that, but, you know, at the moment we're just trying to build relationships. But we have, you know, we reach out to both parties, or all parties actually, we're non-partisan. So we're not associated with a particularly left-wing agenda, and we're just interested in the aims and objectives that we have, which work for all lesbians as far as we're concerned. So we've talked to Conservatives, we've talked to Labour, and we'll carry on doing that. And I think it's important.
So there's people that want to have the conversation, and
there are. I mean, they have to be, it's extremely difficult. And the LGBT Alliance, I haven't mentioned them, but they're sort of a bit like us, except that they but they have LGB in their title, and they're run by gay men and lesbians and bisexuals, and for them as well. So they also have tried to meet politicians, and they found it difficult at times. You really have to kind of carrot and stick, sometimes the stick, sometimes the carrot, but you can just be completely ignored. So at times you have to really try and shame them into it. But that is not our approach. We are really just trying to approach people in good faith and say, look, this is who we are. This is what we do. If you're going to have conversations with lesbians, interests at stake, then we want to be there too. And it's a reasonable thing to ask,
Sure, absolutely. Somebody has a question. Have you read the book called "You Told Me You Were Different: An Anthology of Harm"? Are you familiar with that book? Okay. I guess they're recommending it. It's a compilation of stories from young women who were involved in the TQ community.
Okay.
So
Who's it by? Who's it edited by?
It doesn't say, but it's in the US library system, but it's You Told Me You Were Different: An Anthology of Harm. So I'll make a note of that.
Okay.
Some other question here. She's saying the gender critical lobby has been captured by the right in Canada, conservatives and libertarians. What is the relationship with the right for those of you resisting gender ideology in the UK? Well, you kind of said
we're Broadchurch. We have, so for every political, so now this is moving out of the lesbian discussion to the more gender critical discussion, but for every political party, there is a kind of association that's set up to lobby them on our behalf. Yeah. So there's Conservatives for Women, there's Liberal Voices for Women, there's there's Lesbian Labour, and there's also Labour Women's Declaration. So basically every major party has a kind of, I don't know what you'd call it, a group that's set up to basically hold their feet to the fire and keep agitating. And all those groups talk to each other. I think they talk once a week. And we've got Women's Place, which is a left-wing socialist organisation. We've got Sex Matters, which is, I don't know where it is, but centre, definitely, if not slightly to the right. But, we talk to each other. Yes. And you can have lots of different views about that, but I am very happy with it because I think it's effective. And I think that politics basically requires pragmatism, reaching across the aisle, working together on shared interests. And I cannot stand guilt by association or purity spirals. I have had them up to beyond. The number of times that people have deplatformed me, said that I shouldn't be on a platform with such and such a person, or they shouldn't be with me. It's just kind of contamination politics.
Right.
It's like, you've got germs. You spoke to her.
Right.
And I just hate it. So in my life, there's no place for that.
Yes. And we need a broad coalition to fight something that's so strong anyway. We can't be in our own little bubbles. Nothing's going to happen.
Yeah.
So
we shouldn't be frightened to say where we disagree.
No,
that's nobody's saying you have to agree on everything. That's why it's healthy to have a culture of free expression and debate. But what I personally think it's better to argue with ideas than to call out people, especially when they're people working on roughly the same side as you for this particular issue. To call them out is destructive, divisive, causes endless toxicity. Right. And you could just go straight to the source and call out the racism over, the men, the political parties, the ideas.
Yes.
that would be more helpful in my
Yes.
view. And that's just a general comment about every feminist movement that's ever existed. So
There's been a lot of that going on lately, I've noticed, yes.
here too.
In response to the previous comment about the gender critical lobby being captured, somebody has made a comment, speaking of disagreeing, which is always what I'm hoping will happen too. Somebody's saying the gender critical lobby has not been captured in Canada by the right. So there's another opinion. And
Good.
I would say that the gender critical, I'm tiring of that term myself too, but the gender critical lobby in Canada has been feminist. And I think the right has just jumped on a few bits of it recently. And then basically they just shout out, where are all the feminists? Why aren't feminists concerned about this? Because they haven't been watching what we've been doing for 15 years.
Yeah.
So.
And you just got to keep doing your thing, whatever your thing is.
Yeah.
And you cannot expect other women to all go along with what you do, and you cannot control what they say. Right. But you can carry on doing your thing and showing the world that there is an alternative to whatever you think shouldn't be done. And that's incredibly positive. And we need 1,000 flowers to bloom, lots of different, we all have strengths and we all have areas of attack. And, the women, I don't actually know the details, but, on average, the person who's talking to the far right will not be talking to the left. So somebody's got to talk to the left.
That's right.
I know, of course, what happens is that the left then come back and say, oh, you associate with far right people because of that person. But that's where I just say, I'm sorry, I just don't do this. Right. I'm not even going to entertain that kind of criticism. As I said at the beginning, it's like the playground, and it's like you've got germs.
Right. Right. Somebody has a sort of a more personal question. How do your adult children respond to your activism? She's saying, my granddaughter identifies as trans, and that's caused some real challenges between them, between the family, relating to her daughter and the granddaughter. And how are your kids with, so you've got some older...
I mean, I've got 2 boys and a little girl, and the 2 boys are, have not had their heads turned by any of this.
No.
So, and thank God, but I wouldn't say it's anything I've done. I've really tried not to indoctrinate them in the other direction. I've really tried to keep it away from them, to be honest, just have a normal life together. And they kind of think it's funny, they think it's funny what I do. Right. And actually, and occasionally we do talk about the substantial issues, and they're shocked, like everybody else is shocked when they hear about it. If you haven't already had an ideological sort of bent placed upon it for you, then they're shocked. But I try not to let it govern every aspect of my life. Right. Yes. Or theirs.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's very difficult. I mean, obviously if we had a girl, I think that would be different. I think girls are much more susceptible to this through their peers. Yes. And I don't take any credit for the way things turned out. I just feel lucky.
Yes. And in the children's schools there, here people are, I've seen pictures of schools where, depending on the teacher, the whole classroom can be trans flags and rainbow flags, and charts about where to put your femininity and masculinity on a map with a Barbie and a G.I. Joe. And that's happening in Canadian schools. Is that happening in schools there?
Oh, it's been happening for a while. Yeah. Because we have a bit of the curriculum that's called personal and social development or something. I can't remember exactly the term, but basically a lot of schools will outsource that to some kind of fun organization that says, we'll come along and teach your kid about equality and sexual orientation and all that. And then that's where all the genderbread men and the crazy stereotypes and the very kind of explicit sexual stuff that comes in. Yes. So it's a mess. And again, the outgoing Conservative government has made attempts to address this. And I dare say the incoming government won't change those. So basically, they're going to try and take control of that curriculum to wrest it back from these sort of activist organizations, which is a
Okay,
good thing. It's a good thing.
right. Here's a fun question from Aaron, who you know. Aaron saying, lesbians I know in Canada have wondered how to identify other GC lesbians at events. Any advice on how we can single to one another?
Well, there's
Without-
obviously Harry Potter t-shirts for those of you
Yeah.
that wish to do that. I'm not into wearing t-shirts like that, so it's difficult. Yeah, I mean, there used to be in back in the day, wasn't it, like handkerchiefs in your back pocket and stuff like that?
Yeah.
So I think we just need to resurrect some kind of code.
Maybe a
I'm not sure
double
what.
women symbol handkerchief hanging out of the back pocket or something. Yeah.
Yeah, although it's not really very secret, that is it?
No, it isn't. No, that's true. But you
I
know,
think you need
we have
something
to
a bit
stop
subtle,
being...
deniable. You need something deniable.
I
So
like to take certain books and read them out in public in a coffee shop or something, you know.
yes.
But I'm not, doing that to look for a date necessarily. But I'm trying to not hide what I'm doing. Is my main thing is
Yeah.
to be myself, and if myself includes taking Helen Joyce's book to the brewery and having a beer in the sunshine, I have the book up, and
Yeah.
anyway,
Great.
it's just called Trans, and my partner said, well, it's they probably think it's a pro-trans book. So
Yeah, exactly. That's true.
then I'll take your book and it'll be Material Girls, and it'll have something about reality written on it. So it might be better. Okay,
Yes.
here's Lucy wants to know, how do you think Labour's pitching itself currently with regards to these issues in advance of the election? There's been some recent movement, but how deep do you think it is? And what about Scotland? Is it getting any better?
Well, it looks like the SNP are going to be seriously pushed back in the next election as well. So I don't know. It's a good question. I mean, they're keeping their cards very close to their chest in all sorts of ways. I mean, as far as I know, the manifesto isn't out yet. I think my sense is, and this is not really any inside knowledge, it's just from watching, my sense is that they're at the leadership level, because they are very keen, they seem to be very keen to present this kind of quite socially conservative image at the moment. I think they're conscious that so they're emphasizing patriotism, and they're not going to be the party of high taxation, and they are doing stuff for working people. It's quite a conservative message for a Labour Party. So I feel it's unlikely that they would suddenly chuck in to all of that something about self-ID. I think they have in the past committed to protecting single-sex spaces, but what does that mean exactly? Because they've also just said that the Equality Act is fine as it is. It isn't fine as it is. It's very ambiguous. So there's a lot of things that aren't clear. But I feel, unlike many of my fellow gender criticals, I feel quite confident that they won't do anything crazy, because they've seen how damaging it is to go into an interview and not be able to say unambiguously what a woman is. And Keir Starmer's come a cropper. He's going to be the next leader. He has said some ridiculous things like, it shouldn't be said that all women have cervixes. That's something that shouldn't be said. Or I think he said at one point that 99% of women didn't have a penis.
That's right. That's right.
It's a highly technical number that he'd crunched extensively to come up with that elusive 1% of women that have penises.
That's right.
It just makes them look ridiculous. So I can't see that they will want to do that. But, I could be wrong, and people will say that I'm being very naive, I'm sure.
Yeah. Someone wanted to know if you have anything to say about strategies for organizing lesbian spaces, lesbian events, lesbian organizations.
I mean, our only attempt to do it at the Lesbian Project, we had a one-day event that got protested so badly that they closed the road outside. People couldn't leave. They were setting off smoke bombs.
Yes.
So, that was very stressful.
Yes.
I think that, so the short answer is no, because Julie and I both acknowledge that we would love to support other people to do it. But as soon as our name is attached to a lesbian-only event, it is just
You're a
you
magnet
know,
for
you might
punishment.
as well
Yeah.
just call all the trans activists to the yard immediately.
Yes. Right.
So I don't know, but yeah, my big bit of my big tip would be from the person I know that runs the lesbian only spaces that are successful, is a club night, is basically just don't go on Twitter, you know, don't advertise them, don't be very bullish about it, just kind of like build up a community.
And invite
It's not
them.
to say that you can't, you know, get security on the door to eject, but you don't have to take it all to social media where everything gets much more febrile.
Right. Yeah, it's pretty harsh here. And I think some people maybe even on this call might not realize some of the really vile attacks on women when trying to organize events like this. Having a meeting, for example, is a reason to bang on windows and tell women, you know, horribly sexual aggressive things, and even physically assault in some cases, death threats and rape threats. Like, that is not uncommon. And I think sometimes if people aren't in the thick of this, they don't realize, because of course that doesn't get reported either. If, you know, a woman gets punched in the face at a protest because she's protesting that the swimming pool is letting men in and she doesn't want her daughters in the swimming pool in the change room, you know, if she gets knocked over the head, nobody really.
Yeah. I mean, my co-director, Julie Bindel, was assaulted leaving an Edinburgh meeting, a gender critical meeting in Edinburgh, by a trans activist.
Yes. Yeah. Somebody's asking, are you concerned that we will stop men and women's sports?
Yes,
and transing,
I'm very concerned.
And transing kids, and in the process lose the rest of women's rights. Oh, I'm not sure how that.
Well, I'm very concerned about sports, and everybody should be. If you care about women's sports, you should care about the cowardice and failure of governing bodies to keep males out of women's sports. I mean, it's not difficult. No matter how they identify, they have an advantage. And yet we are seeing at amateur and elite level males taking prizes, taking competition places.
It's really snowballed lately. I've seen so many men on the podium at a women's event.
I mean, we've got no capacity to keep them out. If the governing bodies don't come up with the right policies, then, you know, what can we do? And
yes,
even yesterday or the day before, the International Olympic Committee has put out a decree saying that we can't really talk about women in terms of biological femalehood anymore. That's not appropriate.
Wow.
You know, I mean, never underestimate the power of these activists to get to people and bamboozle them, basically. And I suppose there's going to be equality, diversity, and inclusion people involved in that whole discussion. But the upshot is that women athletes suffer. It's disgusting.
Well, and it goes right to little girls. You know, girls will stop. There's girls that have walked away from sports, or young women that have walked away because they show up and there's 3 men on the other team. And that's it. And then now with the US changing Title IX, which was such a one of the huge things they did for equality between men and women in colleges and universities. Now, any person who says they're a woman can be protected under Title IX.
Yeah.
No longer.
I mean, and they can go into changing rooms, and men can go into women's changing rooms as well as play on the same sports teams. I mean, one thing I want to say, because you can relate this back to this question about the right. The thing I think is that the left, the Democrats, basically, I don't even know if you can call them proper left, they gifted this to the right. You know, this is like an open goal to the right. People will see this shit happening and they will know it's unfair, and then they will vote for Trump. You know, and it's not our fault for pointing it out. It's their fault for being completely stupid. And even if they don't care about women's sport, they should care about the brand of the Democrats, which is going to, you know, get incredibly tarnished through this sort of thing. So it's it's just been left for the right to take the prizes because they
And
can name biological reality and the left can't.
it's the
So we
same thing
just
that's
have to
happening
just,
here. It's
yeah,
happening here, and people like me don't feel like there's anyone to support, anyone to vote for, because I do see myself as left. It's important to me because of the foundation and the history and the what it means, and what it means in terms of class and struggle, people's struggles, marginalized people. I'm not going to become right wing, and I'm not going to let the left wing ideas be taken away from me. But yeah, the left is, you're right. They are just handing it over because
yeah.
people are moving over on one issue. And I know of some women that are going to vote conservative here in Canada because they've been fighting for this one issue for 5 years or however long they have, and they just see one party that's saying, we believe females are women and women are females. Yeah. Yeah. Let's have a couple more questions before we let you go, Kathleen. It's flown by. You know, we're talking about lesbians, but somebody wanted to talk about what's going on in prisons, in women's prisons, and certainly women's prisons. There's lesbians, as well as all kinds of other women and very disenfranchised women for the most part. Is that still happening? I know it's happening here. There's about 30 men, I think, in Canadian women's prisons. Is there?
Is it happening? I think it is, but it's not. I'm not very up to date on the latest. I mean, obviously, the Nicola Sturgeon and the Scottish National Party came cropper by their policy because a rapist called Adam Bryson was originally placed in a women's prison. But I mean, he was not the first rapist that had been put in a Scottish prison.
No.
And there were some in England as well. I must admit that I don't know exactly what's going on there. It's certainly not as easy as it used to be to do it. But I do know that it's still happening in Canada, and it's happening in Ireland, I believe, and it's happening in California, and it's
the US.
So it's
all through the West Coast anyway. Seattle, Washington State, Seattle, Oregon, California, and some others. Yeah, for sure. Well, I know that some other people could talk about this a lot better than I can, but most of the men that are in Canadian women's prisons have been convicted of violent sexual crimes. Something like 70% of them, they have all been profiled, and it's actually been finally on the government website how many trans people are in women's prisons. You can find out their names and what their crimes are as well. And so, because often I find that I tell people about these things and they immediately doubt it and say that can't be happening, because of course you want to think that can't be happening. Where did you hear that? As if I, was on some.
That's an amazing advance to where you were, if you don't want me saying. I mean, because I remember reading a piece in Quillette by, is it April Hutchison? April, and it was years ago, and she had done all this detective work to find out these, these rapists, these murderers in Canadian women's prisons, and it was obviously happening, but people still just wouldn't believe it. Just wouldn't believe it.
No.
So if it's on the government website now,
there's some reference to it on the government website, and I don't know if from there you can get linked to these individuals with their names and their crimes. But I think they probably don't call them men; they probably call them gender diverse or trans people. But they do acknowledge that males have.
And I'm sure you know that at least it's 50%. So the rate of sexual offending for trans-identified prisoners is much higher than for non-trans identified male prisoners. I think and across in Britain and in the US, I don't know what it's like in Canada, but I'd be very surprised if it's any different. So
yes, for sure. Here's a question. That was an interesting note, a point about organizational policy changes in the absence of a law, like you were talking about, Stonewall influencing everybody. I wonder how it's shaped UK advocacy strategies. I wonder if some of our hesitancy is because of potential legal responses.
Maybe. I mean, the Stonewall's big sort of mantra or whatever was that they wanted organizations to get ahead of the law, ahead of it. Like
Yes.
the law is the kind of basic minimum, but in order to be truly progressive, you should be changing your policies to let self-identification happen here.
Right. Yeah. Somebody else was asking about prison. Have you had any contact or knowledge about lesbians in prison there, or had any? That's not been part of the work of the project yet, I guess.
No, it hasn't. We have had a talk from Professor Jo Phoenix at the event that I mentioned, and she did lesbians in the criminal justice system.
Right.
She did a talk about that. I mean, she's a criminologist, so I think there is some good work, obviously, going on.
Yes.
About that. Not, I imagine, by people who can't define what a lesbian is, but like Jo, there are, I am very scathing about the academic system a lot of the time, but there are some people, obviously, lots of people in there trying to do good work and succeeding.
Yes. Well, I know Jo Phoenix did some work with Canadian women in prison over here too, and wrote a piece about Canadian prisons, and worked with some activists here that are, there is an organization of women that are activists that were formerly incarcerated women that are working and supporting women inside, and they are also getting the stories directly from the mouths of the women.
Right.
And there's mother and baby divisions in some of the prisons, right? There's women that they're pregnant or they have a baby, and their babies are allowed to stay in there with them for a few years when they're little. So they have more of a village kind of cottage setup where it's more like home. And some men, including a man who apparently was raped and killed a 2-year-old child in BC here, is in a mother and baby, has been in proximity, can walk around in those facilities. So women are terrified, and it seems like it's very urgent. It's very, very urgent.
I mean,
but Trudeau added that to the list, I think, within 10 minutes of being elected. And that was 8 years ago. So,
yeah. I mean, there's something apparently very powerful about the image in people's minds, sort of people who don't know anything else about a situation, of a transsexual woman, as in a man who's had genital surgery and has taken lots of hormones, being put in a male prison, and that's the thing that people find terrifying, quite rightly, I should think. But we've changed the entire system for this one demographic and for the sort of emotive image that people have in people's minds about that. But they don't have an emotive image of the mother and baby worrying about the pedophile next door, and they really should. Right.
And there's such simple ways to solve that, where, so-called trans women could have a place.
Yeah, well, there actually is a wing for trans-identified males in the British prison system now.
Oh, okay.
That's been in the last few years. But there I mean, I don't know. What I don't know is whether you only get sent there, or whether some of them still, I think, because the thing that they now, I think, have said for a while is case by case basis, which is just crazy.
Right. Like, yes. Who's deciding? And
the system is not strong enough to feel that case by case decision making is reliable in the area of sexual offenders and women's prisons.
And what's coming up for the Lesbian Project? What are some of the things going forward in some of your plans? I know you have like a 5-year plan or 3-year plan, or
well, we're investing in some more research right now.
Yes.
We are also investing in some fundraising help.
Okay, good.
Basically, we are going to try and make some pitches to trusts and foundations and, as the saying goes, high net worth individuals. So I've learned all these new concepts I never had before. But basically, we do need, in order to do the things that we want to do and to have the kind of impact we want to, then we need a bit more money. But in the meantime, Julie and I do the podcast, obviously, and enjoy doing that. I think, and just a whole new government will be coming in. So we'll be trying to build up relationships with a new set of people.
Right. Right.
and keep an eye on what's happening. We do also, ideally we like to work with international organizations who are doing the same sort of thing. And we're keen to support people and organizations who have the same sorts of aims as us internationally. So that's why I'm really happy to talk to you all and to come over to Vancouver indeed.
Yeah, we'll be calling you when we get our first
exactly.
structure set up. Yeah.
Good idea.
Yeah, because you just have to do it and see what happens,
You have to take all the, you're going to get a lot of shit, but after a while you just get used to it. So.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. I wanted to ask you, how many subscribers do you have to your podcast? How is that growing? That must be growing.
Well, I mean, I don't actually know if I want to say, just because I feel like any information I give just exposes us to our enemies. But
okay.
In total, we have over 3,000 subscribers, but obviously most of those don't pay. So we have a lot of free subscribers.
Yes. Okay.
But we have a healthy, growing group of people, and always keen to have more. Well, so basically, we have a free episode and then a premium episode. So if you subscribe, if you give us some money, then you get access to all of it. Right.
Well, and I'd like to recommend that to people here, and it's not hard to find because you just have to Google Lesbian Project podcast, and I've watched
and we just talk a lot of nonsense, basically.
Yeah, a lot of laughs and analysis about things from the comical to the musical to the academic jokes, and it's quite fun. And sometimes you have guests, and that's fun.
Yes, we've had Aaron and we've had Martina. Yes, Lucy Masood. We've had a lot of great guests, and we'll continue to.
Oh, here's one last question here to Sheila. Do you have a sense that the gender critical movement is tending to be a movement of older or younger women? I've been wondering about the ages of those participating. So this is someone who maybe hasn't been involved in.
Well, it's older. I mean, I think you can't deny that it's older, because trans identification is a trend that's so strong in millennials in particular. I mean, I keep getting told that Gen Z are rebelling against it, but then if they are rebelling, then they're not necessarily joining us to rebel. They've got their own forms of rebellion, and I think that's kind of what you'd want anyway. So we've had some young women at our meetings, and there's always young women there, but they're not in the majority. And I think that's kind of what you'd expect, because it takes a while for this stuff to kind of, for you to apply it in the real world and think and see how it affects you when you're pregnant, or for instance, that's the most obvious one. People get pregnant and they suddenly realize that they are quite different to these other people over here. And there's a whole set of needs that they have that the other people over here don't have. But that takes a while. So, and people are putting off pregnancy now to their 30s. So
I always say that being pregnant, I have a daughter who's in her 40s, and being pregnant was really what turned me into a feminist, is how I felt. And
well, Mumsnet in Britain is Mumsnet's this massive online forum for mums in particular, and it's known as the portal that radicalizes people into gender criticism.
Isn't that great? Because here the language has changed so poorly. I don't know if you maybe have the same terrible language in healthcare, but now there's male healthcare. There can be a big placard that says, attention men, get your, checked out for prostate cancer. And then there's one beside women that says, people with cervixes, get your front hole checked. Like they're starting to use front hole here for the Canadian Cancer Society now.
I saw that.
So I'm encouraging everyone to write to them.
It's disgusting. But it's mostly women that are doing this.
I know.
It's women that are changing the language. And the reason the men's language isn't getting changed is because the men are saying no. So we have to stop being nice. When in fact what we're doing is incredibly harmful. But everybody knows that. That's listening, I'm sure.
Yes, women are holding up this quite a bit, for sure. There's a few hardcore male trans activists, and then just other hanger-on men in black hoodies and stuff and black masks.
The
They like to
usual.
go to everything.
Yeah, they
And-
do. They just like
and-
to be aggressive.
Yeah, they like to be aggressive and yell, scream in women's ears. But then there's the women that are there that are, you know, be kind. Can't you be loving and kind and just love people?
Yeah.
No.
I don't know you. I'm not going to love you.
No. Oh, just as a very specific thing, I said one last question a minute ago, but somebody's asking about Alison Bailey's judgment. I know Alison Bailey is a lawyer. Is she Scottish?
No.
She's
English.
English, yeah. And she was attacked by Stonewall. Stonewall attacked her at her job and wanted to get her fired because of her opinions.
She's a black lesbian and, you know, lived in San Francisco, was very active in the gay rights and lesbian rights movement in the 80s, has a stellar pedigree. Anyway, she was a barrister and she basically said some things online that are pretty sensible things as far as I'm concerned, and both her chambers and Stonewall attacked her for it, and really viciously. So that's been an ongoing case, and I think oh gosh, you're all really putting me on the spot about the details of these. I think we've got to the point at which they've just had a hearing about so she won at least part of her case originally,
right?
I think she's appealed. Yeah, we've just got to the point where she's appealed against the second part of the judgment that she didn't win, and the judgment is still to come out. So we're waiting to hear that.
Right.
But fingers crossed.
So there's a few cases over there that have been
going on. There's a lot going on. There's a lot going on. Yeah.
Yes. And many of us have been watching them and wanting to learn, watching and learning, because inevitably this is going to happen here as whoever's going to take the leap first. I mean, the most high profile case recently was Ros Adams at Edinburgh Rape Crisis. Yes.
Because that's a service run by a man, a man who doesn't have a gender recognition certificate even, and who has just, as it turns out, harassed under his leadership, harassed and persecuted this woman for saying that she thinks it's important that women have their own spaces when they're traumatized from rape. Yes. And they lost. He and the crisis center lost comprehensively that case, which is great. We
don't see him stepping down soon, but hopefully the board will smarten up for some new people.
I mean, no, because that's the thing. There's no accountability anymore. You can be humiliated in the courts and apparently just carry on doing whatever you were doing before. And because he's surrounded by, frankly, women on the board who support him and think that this is a terrible injustice and that they are the inclusive ones and we are the bigots.
Right.
So.
Right. Yes. Any final words of inspiring Canadian lesbians to
me
be cast as you?
No. Well, no. I'm sorry, I don't have any.
Thank you, and good night.
It's great that you're all, as far as I can tell, you're really keen to push back against this. It's all you can do. There'll be victories and there'll be losses. There's been some terrible moments over here. Yes. You could buy the book that's just come out called The Woman Who Wouldn't Wished, and it's about the Scottish situation told from the inside by lots of different women. I've got a piece in it, but that's not why I'm saying it. J.K. Rowling's got a piece in it, but there's testimonies from the women that fought this.
Yes.
And Scotland was, just as captured as Canada.
Yes.
And there's been some devastating moments. Watching the Parliament vote to allow rapists specifically to change their gender on the way to prison.
Yes.
But, you just have to take it on the chin and keep going, as far as I can see. And then they've made some gains.
Yes, and I just ordered that book online. I've ordered it through my local bookstore. What I like to do is when any of these books come out, as I order them from the local bookstore, I always hope they'll bring in a few for the shelf, but they always just bring in mine and hold it behind the counter, and then I hand it to me. So They know that here she comes, because I live in a smallish town, and here I come to get one of these
Yeah.
usually British books.
Yeah, well, this is Scottish, as
Yes.
because Canadians, there's so many Scots amongst Canadians, but you
Yes.
all know how to pronounce wisht.
Yes.
The women who wouldn't wisht.
Yes, for sure. Yeah. Well, and take it on the chin, on a very British way of saying something. Yes, we need to take it on the chin. No, I agree. More speaking out, and if with fear, speak to your friends and family. If you don't want to speak publicly, you can speak to
have a conversation with somebody.
Those that you do love and care about. Yeah. Because it's spreading. Things are changing, but it's a hard country to organize in. It's great to hear about the Lesbian Project. I'm a fan of the podcast because it's a nice, fun thing to do. And I enjoy the laughs. And thanks for taking this time with us too, Kathleen.
Pleasure.
You get to go have your supper now. You're probably hungry.
Have a
We'll
good
talk
day,
to you
everybody.
again. Okay.
Okay. Bye-bye.